The Games of the 30th Olympiad in 2012 are awarded to the city of London.
It's reasonably clear that there have been a series of terrorist attacks in London. There are obviously casualties, both people that have died and people seriously injured.
This was the day that London feared, but had been warned to expect. The day the capital was at the mercy of suicide bombers.
Somebody came in and just said, "Governor's report, a bus has blown up." That, for me, then was the sign that, yes, we were under a terrorist attack.
Tonight you'll hear from those in command and those at the front line who responded to the unfolding horror.
Yeah, I'm at Aldgate. I can confirm bomb damage to train.
Brother Kilo 103, can you confirm you said bomb damage, over?
Confirm bomb blast to the train.
The thing I remember most was the floor was all wet, and it was, there was blood on the floor. There was blood all around the inside of the carriage, and it was something out of a horror film, really.
To be quite honest, I was scared stiff. I looked up them stairs into the carriage, and I thought for a split second that I couldn't do it. There's no way I can get on there.
Using unseen footage and reconstruction, this is the story of the day the bombs came.
You're in control, is there anywhere you wanna go? You're in control, is there anything you wanna know? The future's for discovering. The space in which we're traveling.
How to party yesterday. And in Singapore,
the leaders of the group of 8 nations begin their formal talks at their summit in Gleneagles this morning. Tony Blair has acknowledged that
there's no Northern Line more than to Stockwell because of a broken down train, and he got delays on the rest of the Northern Line. I'll have more in 15 minutes.
Travelling that morning was a policewoman in plain clothes.
Normally I would drive to Tottenham, but today I took the train and planned to go on the tube around the Circle Line to Westminster and then walk. I got to Liverpool Street at 8:42. I went onto the platform, then the train came in and I got on. And it was very busy, and I stood in the middle of the carriage and held onto the middle rail with my rucksack down between my feet.
PC Lizzie Kenworthy is a schools officer in North London, but that day she was on her way to a conference.
You don't make much eye contact and chat to people on the train, but it was no different to any other morning.
There were 4 others on the move. Three of whom, on arrival at King's Cross, took different tubes in different directions. One had pre-recorded a chilling message.
Until we feel security, you will be our targets. And until you stop the bombing, gassing, imprisonment and torture of my people, we will not stop this fight. We are at war and I'm a soldier. Now you too will taste the reality of this situation.
At 8:50, there were explosions on packed underground trains near King's Cross, Edgware Road and Liverpool Street, where Lizzie's train had just pulled out of the station.
There was a loud bang, and the train came to a standstill, and soot or smoke came into the carriage, and people stayed very calm. I think the lights had gone out and flickered, but there was some light. And I said to people around me, keep calm, don't panic, don't go out on the line because it'll still be live.
Early indications weren't sinister.
Romeo Oscar 205, go ahead, over.
Yes, foreign officer on scene. Initial report do not suggest explosion, possible electrical fault.
Well, the incident got reported to us within a minute of it happening by our substation control room that actually said, we have a power failure. And we've lost traction current, we've lost signalling current between in the Liverpool Street area.
The control panels simply showed that a train travelling eastwards between Liverpool Street and Aldgate stations had stopped.
At that stage, I thought we'd had some sort of electrical fire or something like that. And remember, it wasn't a particularly loud bang, and we were all right. I didn't even fall over.
But staff at King's Cross and Edgware Road stations also began to report problems.
All units are stand by. Any Lima Tango units able to attend Edgware Road at Metline Underground Station? We've got reports there of a person being struck by a train.
The calls were confusing.
Dick, I've got a metal liaison here, and over the radio they're receiving reports of train collision between Liverpool Street and Aldgate. Driver 264, whatever's happened to Liverpool Street, there's a knock-on effect at King's Cross Underground.
So Victor received, we had a further update from Alpha India Control. The state of a train collision, that's what the Metropolitan Police are picking up, over.
I've got 3 incidents which any one of those on their own is a significant incident. Why have I suddenly got 3? What's going on here?
Yes, foreign officer on scene. Initial report do not suggest that explosion can be established if NSY are sending a unit.
Always say, we'll put over to Ken, see if we can...
Well, it was going to be a pretty significant day because it was about 4 months since I'd taken up office, and on my first day I'd had a huge meeting of senior staff, and I'd planned to have exactly the same group of people back 4 months later on. I said to my staff, don't interrupt me unless there's something dramatic, because I have not written a speech.
We're getting a report there's been a large explosion. Roger, we are attending. Bear with me.
And at 9:20, my staff officer and my chief of staff knocked on the door and said, I think you need to know what's happened.
Can I suggest we declare this a major incident? I think we should declare this now and start the ball rolling from there.
Stuck in tunnels, passengers began to record what was happening on their mobile phones.
I left my carriage and I went to the next carriage, and I realised that something serious had happened because some people had got injuries that looked as if they'd be hit by glass, and I could see that there was more damage and more disarray in that carriage. And I walked through and I said, keep calm, I'm a police officer, can I help anybody? And people just looking at me in shock.
Above ground, life continued as normal. Most were oblivious to the terror unravelling beneath their feet. But London Underground had to act, and fast. About 3 million people travel on the tube every day, commuters that could now be in danger.
So what we decided to do, round about 11 or 12 minutes past 9, we gave the instruction to suspend the train services across the network. I issued a code word, and the code word, which is an internal code word, but it's a procedure, is called Code Amber. Now that is a hell of an implication. It's not a decision that you take easy, but equally, once you know that there's something really serious has happened, you can't play God.
This was only the second time in over 140 years that Code Amber and an evacuation of the entire underground had been ordered.
Breaking news we're getting from the PA Newswire that there's been reports of an explosion outside Liverpool Street Station. That, of course, in the East End of London.
Emergency services have been called to London's Liverpool Street Station after reports of an explosion.
Now, some breaking news. Reports are just coming in of an explosion at Liverpool Street Station here in London.
0 Alpha. 112 Alpha, go ahead, GT over. Yeah, I appreciate it's very difficult, but the request from staff at King's Cross is the need for the Pancras Road closed for the secondary evacuation positions.
Yes, received.
Bewildered tube passengers spilled onto the streets and were left with no choice but to walk to work or squeeze onto already crowded buses.
Getting reports in as well that several of the London Underground stations have been evacuated. Obviously, I'll bring you the latest on the travel implications.
With the help of Underground staff, passengers began to leave the trains on the shut-down system.
Can I have your utmost attention, please? This is a very serious incident happening here. We need your cooperation. We're doing our best. We now need your help. We have pregnant people aboard this train that are getting very distressed. Can I urge you, please, to open all interconnecting doors and move as far down the train as you can?
Under Liverpool Street, people were desperate to escape the smoke and fumes. But Lizzie decided to stay and continue to the front of the train.
I came to the next carriage and saw the door, which looked as if it had been like a piece of paper that had been screwed up and just stuck in the doorway. It was twisted and warped. And a man was standing by it, and he said, "Don't go in there." And I said, "Well, I must. I'm a police officer. I must go in there. I must see what's happened." And I went in.
Lima November 3, go ahead. The second report that's now coming over the net radio is that behind the collisions we've now got persons trapped and walking in the underground.
To work at the moment, I'm afraid. Well, I'm sorry.
A decision was taken to cordon off the streets around the stations to keep everyone, including the press, away.
Sorry, 111 Bravo. What's the current situation and do you need more troops on the ground, over?
We're trying to create a cordon, but we're just running out of officers.
No excuses, everyone to go that way. Okay, thanks very much. Excuse me, keep moving. Keep moving in this direction, please.
Hearing the emergency calls, one young British transport policeman decided to commandeer a vehicle.
There was a PCSO van, like a traffic warden's van, and I ran up to him, just showed me a warrant card and said, like, "We need to take your vehicle." And then we heard that there was walking wounded at Russell Square.
Any uncommitted Lima Tango, any Libyan able to attend the Russell Square Underground Station? We've got reports there of numerous walking wounded at this location.
I'm not far from Russell Square, 10, can we proceed?
Yes.
I just said, we're going to Russell Square. And I remember the driver saying, actually, we've got to go to Knightsbridge. And I was like, no, we're going to Russell Square, put your foot down, we're off.
The crippled train between King's Cross and Russell Square had suffered the worst damage, as the blast had taken place in the confines of a narrow tunnel. One passenger had been on it for less than a minute when the explosion occurred.
Suddenly, it feels like I was falling in black, thick liquid or tar. And my immediate sensation or thought was that I was having a heart attack and that I was dying in the tube. I realised I couldn't breathe, and I sort of opened my eyes, and this blackness that I thought was my own blackness was actually everywhere. It was like being transported almost in a parallel world, that you've gone from a bright sunny day to suddenly, the bowels of the earth have opened up and you're somewhere completely different.
We pulled up at the end of the road and we all just jumped out of the van. I was first out and I just sprinted down towards the station. There was a small gathering of people outside. we had to get everyone out of the area. So I was running down the road just screaming at people, you know, get out, get down the road, you know, evacuate the area basically.
At that stage we were pretty unclear because we didn't know whether these were bombs or there was this issue about an electrical surge.
Police. The noise could have been power related, is some speculation we're hearing from
So that's
Reuters,
what the passengers are being
though
told,
still early days.
that it is because of a power fault across the network.
And we switched on Sky, as the same as everybody else does, to try and get some idea of what's going on. But I also have cameras which can be played on monitors in my room, so I was able to look at the outside of Aldgate East and one or two of the other areas, and I was pretty clear that something very difficult was happening.
Since 9/11, our emergency services had stepped up training for a major terrorist incident. Senior officers were given specific command titles: gold, silver and bronze, with the police in charge.
Yes, that's what we say.
In the early stages of any incident, it is massively confusing. You know, there's large amounts of information coming in, lots of people using the radio systems, there's reports over telephones, and in the hiatus, in the crisis, the right in the eye of any crisis is always difficult to get any real detailed information.
We're trying to direct a course, but we're just running out of...
Monitoring course name repeat. Sorry, 111 Bravo. What's the current situation and do you need more troops on the ground?
Yeah, it's all chaos. We're not together at the moment. We're both close to the end in that case.
Two 123 Charlie, 123 and you're still with Expo. Two 123 Charlie, 123 Charlie, did you over?
Some reports of collisions between trains, explosions. This is affecting Aldgate, Liverpool Street, King's Cross, Stratford, Edgware Road, the Piccadilly lines. The whole of the London Underground system has now been brought to a standstill through this power outage.
Bravo Kilo 11, active message over. Kilo 11, go ahead. You're there, Bravo Kilo 11. We've got about 2 serious casualties emerging at King's Cross. Apparently got a lot of casualties walking wounded on the line. Can we an ambulance please to King's Cross?
Just going to interrupt you, getting a report from Reuters, a witness report saying people are streaming out of Aldgate tube station covered in blood.
Passengers who had walked to safety showed no signs of vomiting or frothing at the mouth when they emerged into the daylight. That ruled out a chemical attack.
We had a big noise and it just went all dark and the dust went everywhere and then it just stopped. But there was lots of people injured, apparently someone died, someone had his legs cut. It was really, really bad.
Guys, are you ready to get people on that side of the road, please?
People didn't know what the hell had happened. I don't think it was derailed, but it was black and very, very smoky. People were panicking that there was going to be a fire.
Eventually everyone starts collecting themselves and trying to stay low and cover their faces. And we hear a woman screaming. I couldn't really tell which way it was from, but everyone sort of saying, calm down, calm down. By the sounds of it, she must have been in a carriage full of bodies or something.
Mark, what more can you see? Tell us a bit about the mood.
The emergency services do seem to be in control, but obviously we're not seeing what's happening inside the station or indeed underground.
With most of the passengers now evacuated from the train, PC Lizzie Kenworthy reached the front carriages.
I could see the lights were on in the tunnel, so I had light from outside, and I could see that the side of the train had been torn off, and there was blood dripping down the walls in front of me, and the window had been blown out to my right, and there was a big hole in the floor. And there were passengers to my left and my right, and bodies. I said, help's coming, you know, keep breathing, you're going to be all right. I took my jacket off and tied it round the leg of one of the casualties to stop the blood, and I reassured them. I said, look, help's coming, you're going to be all right. And they were still breathing, and they were talking to me, so they were conscious and breathing, which is the most important thing.
what we had was a large number of people who were potentially injured. We had lives to save, we had people to rescue, whether that was because of some natural catastrophe, whether it was a major incident because of some power failure, or whether it was a terrorist attack. Our basic role is exactly the same. We have to save life, get them to hospital, get them the medical care that they need, make sure that we can preserve as much life as we possibly can.
Please, if you're not being treated by any paramedic, please move your way towards the McDonald's area. This area is called for police and ambulance treatment.
But obviously by the time we realised we've got 3 separate events on the tube system, at the back of your mind was that, is this a terrorist attack? Is this a combined and concerted attack on our infrastructure?
There was a sort of an eerie quality almost to the environment. There was an emergency light, and it was from that emergency light that I was able to see what had happened and the extent of my injuries. And I looked down, and it was quite strange actually, because I felt very removed from myself, but very aware that I was in quite serious trouble. My feet were both almost surgically severed, but still connected to what remained of the lower part of my legs. I was listening to people screaming around me, and one woman was very clear in saying that she was dying, someone needs to help her, and these screams were quite loud, and I just thought, I can't panic, I can't join in that scream, because then my heart will be pumping out too much blood.
Go ahead, Alpha Ranger, stand by. Sorry. Yeah, urgent request for ambulance to Aldgate. There are 9 people very seriously injured. Receive, over. Yes, yes, over. Location, over.
The hospitals in London are on a major alert. A report from St Mary's Hospital, that's in Paddington. A spokeswoman there has confirmed that it's on major alert.
St Mary's Hospital in West London prepared itself to receive casualties from nearby Edgware Road station.
My operating list was supposed to start at 8:30. It was actually getting on for 9:15 and we still hadn't started. And it so happened that the registrar that was with me was carrying one of the cardiac arrest bleeps. And we were within seconds of actually starting to anaesthetise our patient when his arrest bleep went off, announcing that there was a major incident. And in fact, my air call pager went off within a few seconds, so that was the first hint we had.
I think my initial thoughts were, here we go. This is what we've actually been preparing for a long time. We made sure our majors area was cleared, our resuscitation room was up to date with all the necessary equipment. We opened the fracture clinic to receive the walking wounded patients. And we also made sure that a team of staff were available on the ambulance ramp to triage patients.
Echo 546, go ahead.
On scene at King's Cross, I've been approached by the police shutting off Euston Road to get LAS crews here. Apparently there is walking wounded coming out at the moment. I'll say until I've had a look, can we get a couple of ambulances here if we can?
We have probably 400 casualties in the main foyer of King's Cross train station. The majority of which seem to be walking wounded at the moment. Everybody has effects of smoke inhalation.
Lizzie had been waiting on the Liverpool Street train for half an hour and was desperate for help to arrive.
That really, I think really was my only fear, that people would die and I hadn't done enough to help them. The man I didn't reach, I feel very bad about that, but I have to live with that. Eventually, some men in orange jackets were on the track. They said, help's coming, but it actually took quite a long time before they arrived.
One of the first rescuers to reach her train, a British Transport police officer, made a shocking call.
Yeah, I'm at Aldgate. I can confirm bomb damage to train. We're going to need paramedics to the train urgently. There are 9 people very seriously injured. Receive, over.
Bravo Kilo 10, receive. Can you confirm you said bomb damage, over?
The X and Bravo Quebec 10, I confirm bomb blast to the train.
The fireman said to me, we'll put you out of a window. And I said, no, thank you, I'll walk off the train. And I walked down back to where I'd got, left my carriage, and I got off through the doors and put my rucksack on my back, and I walked out.
On the train, waiting to be evacuated.
3 miles away, PC Steve Bryan and his colleagues had just arrived at Russell Square.
I run down to the platform area. You could see that there was smoke coming out the tunnel. There was people that looked like they'd been involved in an explosion. I got on the radio.
Bravo Quebec 10, go ahead, over.
We're going to need more ambulances to Russell Square. We've got roughly 100 injured. One female is struggling to breathe at the moment. We need at least 10 ambulances. Russell Square, please.
Steve and his colleagues set off to find the train. It lay stranded in one of the deepest tunnels on the system, over 10 minutes from the platform. Approaching from the other direction were the fire brigade who had entered the tunnel at King's Cross. Aboard the train was Jill Higgs.
With the amount of blood that I was losing, I guess the main panic that I did feel was, does anyone actually even know we're down here? If the driver is dead, did we have a crash? I don't know what happened. I don't know how long we're going to be here. I don't know how long I can hold on.
We got to the train and it sort of appeared out of the smoke all at once. You could see it silhouetted against the emergency lighting. The smoke was getting thicker the further you got down there. It gave you the impression that something was coming up. What was waiting for us down there.
It was really eerie. It was very, very quiet. There was a dead body of a lady laying outside the train, which had just been put to one side of the actual carriage door, because we went in through the driver's cab.
To be quite honest, I was scared stiff. I looked up them stairs into the carriage, and I thought for a split second that I couldn't do it. There's no way I can get on there. It only lasted for a split second, but it was definitely there. I've never been exposed to a situation like that, where I felt so, so petrified.
As we were walking, I think we were trying to prepare ourselves mentally of what we might see and also what we'd have to do. I then made my way to the connecting door between the second and the front carriage, and I stood there, which seemed like an eternity, but I know it was only like seconds, just confronted by a scene of total, of words, I can't describe it. It was just total mayhem, carnage, just people laying everywhere.
Within 30 minutes of the explosions, a cabinet meeting chaired by John Prescott was abandoned, and a special committee made up of senior ministers, MI5 and the police was convened. Known as Cobra and based in the Cabinet Office, it set up a video link with the Prime Minister in Glen Eagles.
That rules out the earlier reports we had of some power outage. Two other things coming through. We're just being told that the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, is being updated on what is happening in the capital between his meetings with heads of state at the G8 summit in Glen Eagles. So obviously he's getting updated. Coming back to this business about the National Grid.
It was now nearly an hour since the 3 simultaneous explosions on the Underground. Most of London was still unaware of the true scale of what was happening. Then, at 9:47, came another emergency call.
What'll make you the active message go now?
Yeah, PX, there's been an explosion on a bus, street level, Tavistock Square, WC1. We've seen an explosion, we are almost there.
A bomb had been detonated on a packed bus in Tavistock Square, just around the corner from the tube station at Russell Square.
We're off to 90, running from Russell Square, junction of Upper Woburn Street, Tavistock Square. There's been an explosion.
Two detective sergeants, best mates for 16 years, were walking to Scotland Yard for a meeting. They hadn't been able to get on the tube.
We were just approaching the junction with Upper Woburn Place by the fire station. I heard what I described as a vacuum thud. That's what the bomb sounded like. I instantly knew what it was.
We turned left into Upper Woburn Place, and I turned to Steve and I said, the bus has gone up, they've bombed the bus.
And Simon described it as the bus had gone up, I just couldn't believe it because I couldn't see a bus, so I couldn't recognise a bus, even though the bus had turned up in front of us. I said, there's no bus there, Simon. He says, there is, there's a bus there, and it's blown up. There was a large amount of debris, both human and building debris, around. You could see on the ground there was some people very seriously injured. There was an apex shape on the building where the explosion happened. There was obviously human debris up the building as well. So you instantly knew those deaths.
Oh, yes, yes. You have a sit rep over.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it looks like multiple dead. Don't know how many yet. Multiple wounded. Some people still trapped in the bus, which we're attending to. The cordon's back as far as we can to get the injured and dying out.
Somebody came in and just said, Governor's report, a bus has blown up, and gave me the fact that this had come from a police officer who'd seen it. That for me was the confirmation. But then my thought was, well, what else could there that they could be targeting?
Should have done it as an emergency. They should have evacuated. Sorry, we've got a maintenance thing here. Sorry, can we move off the road?
As I was going towards it, I thought there can't be anybody survived this. It looked massive. There was absolutely nothing that could have prepared me for what I saw there. Obviously, we've received training. You see photographs of where there've been bombs go off or where there's been explosions in the past, but the fact that it's in 3D and it's in front of you and there are all sorts of things racing through your mind makes it, you know, almost incomprehensible. There were some very seriously injured people, and obviously some people hadn't survived the blast, and you know, a lot of them were in a really, really bad state. It was totally shocking, totally shocking.
We went past King's Cross and then turned left into Upper Woburn Place. And it was surreal because we turned into Upper Woburn Place and stopped and we were confronted with the bus, and the rear top section had been blown out, more or less simulating like a peeled banana, really. It pushed the force of the blast had pushed the top deck open, and the first floor deck of the bus had collapsed down onto the rear lower deck. I honestly didn't expect to find anyone still alive on the bus. My reaction was that I would probably walk to the bus and find that everyone that was on the bus or who was left on the bus would be dead. There would be no one left there, no one to save. obviously they're just screaming out, "Can you help me? Help me, can you help me?"
Stop moving! Stop moving! Come!
My thoughts were primarily for those that had survived and to get them to a safe place. I can physically remember the fear that I felt when I was doing that. There was a degree of panic, that the what do I do now, what do I do now, that's constantly racing through my head. That was constantly racing through my head. I felt able to focus on what I needed to do, and that sort of subdued, you know, this obviously massive adrenaline rush that I was experiencing.
There was a lot of ambulance in attendance already, but through the nature of the fact that the bus was packed, we'd run out of stretchers. So we were using tables, and at one point we'd even used the blown out windows of the bus to put people on and move them away to one of the triage areas.
Just to have 4 devices go off on public transport infrastructure. We've got a very, very alert public. We have done over a number of years. And the chances of people being able to put down 4 devices in buses and trains without us having any pre-alert to any of them is, for my mind, unlikely. But these were no-notice attacks. These were suddenly we had devices. Now for me, that had the hallmark of Mombasa, Bali, it's suicide attacks.
Just for your info, we've had multiple explosions across all of central London.
My knowledge of transport was enough to say that buses having their roofs blown off aren't part of an electric surge on the underground. And so we knew exactly what it was that we'd got, a terrorist outrage in London.
Yes, sir.
And that's the moment when I just said, right, well, you know, all systems go. This is a major emergency.
The country was now on a Category 3 alert, used only in times of catastrophic national emergency. The government's crisis committee, COBRA, had already suspected that these were suicide attacks. The bombs could not have been detonated remotely, as the trains were too deep underground.
But then my thought was, well, what else could there that they could be targeting? Now the reality is, well, if they targeted it, I can't actually stop it, but what I've got to be able to do is respond to it. So have we got the necessary asset? Have we got police? Have we got fire brigade? Have we got ambulance? Are we in a position to understand what is going in across London and respond to it appropriately?
0101, GTV.
Just a reminder for all units, if you do complete your current assignment and you are available for redeployment, please let us know, because there are plenty of other places for you to go, GTV.
So inspector wants to know what hospitals are taking the wounded, over.
We know that Aldgate are sending to the Royal London. Other than that, we do not know just any hospital you can get them to.
Casualties were rushed to hospitals all across the capital. At St Mary's, seriously injured patients started to arrive from the Edgware Road train.
I remember seeing the very first patient come in who had dreadful injuries. I was shocked by what I saw, and over the course of my career I've seen some really pretty unpleasant things, but this was one of the nastiest things I've seen, and it did rock me. You know, it stopped me in my tracks just for a few seconds. There was a moment's, not panic, but I wondered if this was what we were going to be facing, if there were going to be lots and lots of patients like this.
Below ground, in 3 different locations, a frantic rescue operation had been taking place to reach the dead and the dying.
There was a dialogue of something saying to me, close your eyes, go to sleep, you know, that's the best option. But there was an instinct that said to me, you know, if I do close my eyes, even if I'm just unconscious, if I miss that person with the torch, I will be left down there, because they need to see me raise a hand or raise an arm and say, I'm here, for me to be saved. I looked around the carriage and I made a very, very firm decision, which was, this is not where I die. This is not the end for me. This is not how I die. And the moment I made that decision, the dialogue stopped, and it became easier for me to keep my eyes open. And I just fixed it on my watch face and waited.
The air on the actual carriage was really thick, with sort of a dusty cloud, basically. That's all you could breathe in. You know, you were just breathing in sort of dust and grit, and you could see it in the air. It was just floating in the air. It was like it was all in black and white, but you could tell that everything was covered in blood. You know, the floor was just soaked in blood. All the windows that had been blown out, you could see blood sort of around the window frames on the roof of the train. They were just body parts, really. Sort of something out of a horror film, really. You can't describe it. You know, I've heard some people say it looked like hell in there.
The extent of the damage was, there wasn't one part of that train that didn't contain its own little horror. It was, the ceiling was hanging down, you know, the windows and doors were blown out. Yeah, there was people everywhere. The dead were sort of piled on top of each other, and the injured were, we didn't know who was dead and who was injured. It was that point, everyone was sort of covered in dust and soot, and everyone was very still, and it was so eerily quiet on there. There was no noise whatsoever.
By now, the fire service and the police had linked up on the train where Jill lay desperately injured.
Our main task was moving people out the way, placing them on chairs, just so we could get to the people who were still living. We did it in a dignified way that, I see men I've worked with for 15 years apologising to torsos that they've had to move because the way we're having to treat them just so we can get to the living ones, having to place them on top of each other because the conditions were so cramped, there was no room to move. At the time it was done dignified. When I think back now, it's something that I hope none of us ever have to do again, and hope we never see again.
The first set of double doors, it looked like on the floor was laying the back of one of the seats, the couch on the back of the seat with the patterning on. It looked like one of them was laying in the middle of the carriage, but it had a pair of underpants on it. And I'm standing there staring at it, sort of thinking, what's happened here? What is that? And I spoke to one of my colleagues that was with me, and we suddenly realised it was someone's back. There was no head, no arms, no legs. It was just literally someone's shoulders, lower back, and a pair of underpants. One of the guys sort of said, I think it's a suicide bomber. The fire service turned up at some stage, and I think they agreed with what was being said.
Inwardly, I was absolutely gutted that one of the people that we'd actually moved was actually the cause of the whole incident that day. We'd actually moved someone who had wanted this to happen and apologised to him for having to pick him up and move him and place him where we had to place him, and that's something that we will have to live with. We will, and it's something that we'll get over, but it's something that it was a strange feeling when we found that out.
I kept saying to people, if people were dead, we're leaving them here. If they're dead, they're dead. There's not a lot we can do. We didn't know if there was a second explosion going to take place on the train. We didn't know, if there was more suicide bombers or anything. It was just, we've got to recover where we can as quickly as we can and get off as quickly as we can. you could tell who was alive, you could tell who wasn't, and who wasn't going to make it. So it's just a matter of, you know, helping those that you could help.
A lot of patients had burns, and a lot of patients couldn't breathe very easily, and needed to be anaesthetised fairly quickly after they came in. Lots of patients had facial burns. A lot of patients had limb injuries, some patients had amputations, some had compound fractures, so you know, the bones actually sticking out through the skin, and obviously had lost limbs.
In the back of your mind, you know there's going to be a huge police investigation. And so as part of our resuscitation, our assessment, as we removed clothing from patients, it was all put in sacks for subsequent analysis by the forensic team. And that included, sadly, for a number of patients, body parts, patients that subsequently had amputations. Those severed limbs were also kept for forensic examination.
Let's talk to one of our producers, Bob Mills, who's in Russell Square this morning. Bob, talk us through what you've seen.
If fear and chaos are weapons, then they are very deadly weapons. I mean, you are literally walking along, looking at every bus, and you think, this could be a target.
Although broadcasters were speculating that London had been under a terrorist attack, that hadn't been officially confirmed, and the capital was almost paralysed.
The 6 people we actually got from the carriage that were still alive, they were by now in a case of shock. There was hardly any screaming, just the odd waving of hands, and mainly the look of help, just looking at you, hoping that you could go and help them and get them onto a stretcher so they can get the medical assistance that they needed.
I don't know how long I waited, really, but then I did see the torch, and I did see someone coming toward me, and all I remember were what I now think are the 2 best words in the English language, which are priority and one, and a hand on my shoulder saying, priority 1, it's okay. And after that, it's bits and pieces that I can remember, because I think I just was able to let go, knowing that someone knew I was there.
There was one lady called Jill. She was quite seriously injured. She lost both her legs, from the knee down. One completely. The other one was just, it was just barely hanging on. She was on the left-hand side of the carriage, sort of tucked up on one of the bench seats. Once the paramedics had stabilised her, we carried her out.
Yeah, there was one of the guys I was working with, Aaron. He'd got her into a blanket, sort of wrapped her up to carry her off. She had really bad sort of lower leg injuries, and we all just grabbed a corner of the blanket each, and we walked her the full length of the tunnel.
At one point, I had, part of the stretcher in my hand, and I was holding her hand as well, sort of trying to keep her conscious. All 4 of us that were carrying her just kept calling out her name and everything else and making sure she was alive. And, whenever a grip on my hand sort of loosened, we'd stop and try and bring her around. I'd look for a pulse, and if there was one, try and bring her into consciousness, but she was slipping in and out all the time.
I remember men's voices. I remember people saying to me, "Stay with us, Jill." I remember a conversation going on between the men that were rescuing me of whether they should lift me up and put me over their shoulder or not. I remember feeling that I was in something that was like a blanket.
By the time we got to the platform, she'd stopped talking, she was no longer conscious. And we was told at the time, or shortly afterwards, that she died at the scene.
After handing Jill over, They then went back down the tracks to try and save others.
I remember going into the tunnel, but no, I don't remember the journey down there. I just remember sort of being back on the train, you know. Well, as I come up to the train, there was a body line between the tracks, which was a woman who had died while they were trying to get her off. You know, all I could see was like you know, the paramedics have got these triage tags, and you know, her one was black and it said dead. So I went back up the aluminium stairs back onto the train, and yeah, met up with everyone that was on there. But by then, sort of everything was sort of shutting down.
I remember we stood on the train in silence for about 2 or 3 minutes. It seemed to go on forever, and until finally someone said, you know, it's time to leave. We've got to get off. So we did.
I remember being quite reluctant to leave. It just, there were so many people left down there, or what it seemed to be, that you thought, you know, not all these people can be dead. It was quite, that sort of brought brought it crashing in. That, you know, all these people were dead, and we was just gonna have to leave them where they were. It was quite hard to leave.
I've spoken to the superintendent of BTP. They can confirm there's at least 20 fatalities. They have not got an exact number.
It received, and can I confirm this is on the underground train between King's Cross and Russell Square, GTO?
As far as I know, yes, GTO.
112, I'm grateful to that. Thank you. Obviously, we're thinking of you down here, GTO.
Yes, we'll see, thank you. Yeah, I've spoken to Silver. He is fine, other than he requires body recovery teams for this fatality.
No further lives down there.
52 people died in the suicide attacks of the 7th of July. Over 700 were injured.
This was pitiless. I stood on the train down in Russell Square. I've been a murder detective for many years. I mean, it's one of the odd feelings you get when you go to a murder scene. You look at the body and you kind of get a pact with them. And you say, I don't know who you are, but I will find out who you are and who did this to you. That's what we're looking for now. This is the largest criminal inquiry in English history.
You know, I can still remember sitting in my bedroom in a hotel room that night thinking, for the first time, right, this is what we've actually dealt with today. Thinking about the enormity of the fact we'd had no notice, no mass casualty attacks actually had come to London.
That evening, I remember my mum making me a cup of tea. I stared into it for so long, by the time I took my first sip it was cold, you know.
Certainly for several days afterwards I was thinking that, you know, I'd like to see the carriage up, return the carriage to how it was, where everyone was sitting there before it happened, you know, and restoring it to how it should have been and replaying it in my mind. But I'm trying to get through it and deal with it and get on.
One week on, a grieving but defiant nation stood in silence to honor its dead. Two weeks later, terrorists attempted another attack on London.
It's beyond me. It's a much bigger picture, politically, religiously. This war on terror we're supposed to be fighting, it's not going to go away. You know, there are people that believe that this is what they have to do for their cause. There's nothing I can do to change that, and I've just got to carry on doing what I do and my job. You know, I'm there to protect people and help people, and if I can, I will.
Jill survived despite having 3 heart attacks and losing 75% of her blood. Both her legs were amputated below the knee.
So for someone like me, the words thank you just seem so trivial. I feel like I've escaped with, you know, the minimum of, yeah, it could have been a hell of a lot worse, put it that way, and I'm still me, and I'm still able to get around. I will walk again. It's absolutely, you know, life is precious, and I feel like I've definitely been given life number 2.
It's just made me realise, you know, that I don't know. It's just made me more appreciative of life, really, of what I've got, of what I can do, and, you know, the experiences I can have. You know, it's made me a lot more ambitious. It's made me want to do a lot more, because you know, that day just hammered home how quickly everything can be taken away.
Despite their experiences, PC Steve Bryan and PC Aaron Debnam, like many others, reported for duty the next day.
They've risked their own life to save mine, and that's pretty amazing. Somehow your souls have met, and that's it. Let me give you. Look at me standing.
BBC Three takes a look at the way mobile phones have changed the way news is reported in Citizen Journalist, tonight at 10:35.
If you're having difficulties coping with the effects of the July bombings, then you can call the NHS Trauma Response Line on 0845 850 2878. Calls are charged at the local rate, but some service providers may charge more.